Welcome to Getting Defensive, presented by Gridiron Ratings. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and filling in for Craig tonight. But tonight we are going to be talking about our faves and fades. I am joined, as always, by my friend and Gridiron Ratings senior IDP analyst. You can find him on Twitter at the IDP tipster, Gary Van Dyke. How are you, Gary?
Hello and good afternoon.
Good to see you. Next up, back again, is the author of the Key and Diagnose series at Gridiron. You can find him on Twitter at BJack83. Brandon Jackson. How are you, Mr. Jackson?
Doing great, Jerry. Good to be back.
Good to see you. And of course, there he is, our special guest for the evening, the director of video content and senior content creator for Roto Heat. You can find him on Twitter at Roto Heat. Brad makes it simple. Brad Menendez. How are you doing, bud?
I'm living the dream, gentlemen. I'm honored to be in the presence of such great IDP minds. How are you guys doing?
More. Do we have another guest?
Yeah.
Oh, you meant us.
Yeah. Oh, I meant you guys. It's all you. It's your world. I'm just enjoying the view.
Yeah.
Well, we are so happy to have you on. Before we jump into tonight's show, please do all of your typical YouTube and podcast things like subscribe, follow, leave a comment. It helps us grow and provide you with the content you are looking for. Well, gentlemen, I don't want to waste any time. Let's get right to it. Gary had asked us all to prepare two players that you considered a favorite and at least one who you considered a fade. Now, I'm going to kick it off with you, Brad. Is there anything in particular you look for in a player to consider them a favorite?
So really, this is on either side of the ball, but opportunity tends to be king, especially for the younger players. You know, if a younger guy is getting opportunities in year one, year two, even year three, sometimes those are guys that I would target. They have better opportunities than most if they're on the field and getting playing time. That's why when I looked at doing my faves and my fades, I looked at not only opportunity, but situation, players around them, things like that.
Awesome. That makes complete sense. So who is your first favorite player?
So this is a rookie drafted by the Houston Texans, Jalen Pitre, the safety. In college, he was more of a cornerback. So if you look at how they played him at Baylor, he was more of a slot corner. Most of his reps were slot corner. But in Lovey's probably misfit Tampa 2 defense, he's going to be more of a safety. And the thing that excites me about him is they don't have a lot of talent in that secondary. When you look at what Lovey used to do, his safeties were a big part of what they did. You know, think about Mike Brown and Daniel Manning and some of these guys. They got a lot of tackles. You know, for safeties back in the early 2000s, they were getting 70, 80 combined tackles with some receptions, some forced fumbles, you know, and that excites me. Now, Jalen Pitre is a little undersized at 5'11", but safeties can be a little bit undersized and still be productive. Kid's a bit of a wrecking ball. When you watched him in college, he hit really well. Good shore tackler. You know, there were times where some of the bigger physical guys he had some tough times with, but he held on for dear life and most of the time got him down. So this is a kid that I'm excited about this year because he has not only opportunity, but he's got talent and he's got draft capital. I mean, they took him early, so you got to think that they're going to want to get him in. Now, obviously, we're not at training camp yet, although I am excited it's coming. So hopefully we see some early progression for him. If he picks up that scheme, which I can't imagine will be that terribly difficult because it's very, very standard 4-3 with some Tampa 2 concepts, and he'll be up in the box a little bit more. So I'm excited about Jalen Pitre. What do you guys think?
Garrett, where are you?
I like Pitre a lot.
Oh, sorry, Brandon.
Okay, yeah, I like Pitre a lot, man. I got him in a couple dynasty startups, man. I've been watching film during the rookie draft season, man. And like Brad was saying, man, he's a hitter, man. He played a lot on that line of scrimmage, that jack role, which was like a linebacker safety combo role. And man, he was just rocking cats. I was very impressed with his tape and his coverage skill as well, man. He breaks on the ball very well. He had a couple pick sixes in college. So, you know, I like Jalen Pitre a whole lot, man. Like I said, I got him in a couple of dynasty startups. I picked him over Nick Cross in our IDP Initiative League. I'm very excited about him.
That is awesome. Gary, any thoughts on Pitre?
No, I think both of them already covered. I mean, you know, I'm not super high on rookies, but I definitely love the kid. I mean, and opportunities there. So if it'll be the learning curve, and according to what Brad just said, there's not much of one, and I see it. I think that just history of itself, like he mentioned, is got it covered.
Fantastic. Brandon, who is your first favorite?
I'm going to go with Montez Sweat, edge rusher from the Washington Commanders. I just like I like Montez Sweat this year, especially with the injury to Chase Young, the ACL injury, and there's still doubt whether he's going to be ready for Week 1. And Montez Sweat, he's had some very productive seasons his first 3 years. He's had 9 sacks. He's one of the best edge rushers in the league, in my opinion. He's going to have all the opportunity. He's got a lot of talent around him. Those 2 defensive tackles on the inside. So I'm thinking that he can have. This is going to be probably his best year. Last year it didn't go well, really, for that whole team. Chase Young struggled, and he got an injury he had a broken jaw, so he really didn't get a chance to succeed last season. But I think this year he's gonna show out, and it's gonna be his most productive year.
Looking forward to that. Brad, where are you on Montez Sweat?
So I absolutely agree, Brandon. You're on with him. I think he's got a lot of talent. My concern with him is really the missed tackles. So if you look at over his career, he's kind of sitting in the 15 to 20% range when it comes to missed tackles. If you look at and I tend to not use PFF just to think of fantasy production or fantasy value, but he didn't grade out well in the pass rush. And with as stout as a defensive line as they had, I would love to see him improve there. Now, he's got a coaching staff that supports him. They can train him up. They can help him develop. So I think the sky's the limit. With Chase Young on the other side, who do you double? Then you got those D tackles, like you said. You can't really take on all of these guys at once. So I think you're right. If he's going to have a kind of a boom year, this year could be it potentially. We saw 5 sacks last year. I would love to see him in the 9 to 10 range. If he gets up there, I think with some of the tackles and some of the other things that would go with that production, he could be a really nice play, and you can get him for cheaper. People are looking Chase Young, they're looking possibly Jonathan Allen if you have to start a D tackle. Sweat might be a little under the radar, maybe. So that would definitely be a guy that I would be okay with targeting as my, as kind of my DE2 with DE1 upside potentially. What about you, Gary? What do you think?
Nope. I don't think there's enough IDP production to go across that whole front line and make anybody a super stud except for Chase Young and Josh Allen. I'm afraid there's just not enough meat on the bone there. So I'm not fading him, but I'm definitely not, favoring for a starting position. I notice a lot. This is what I wanted to do when I come up with this topic is because to me, let me ask a question, Brad, especially because you've been around for a while in the IDP industry. I used to make my bread and butter just 5 years ago on finding these sleepers, these breakouts. Now we have a lot of people eyes on. I don't even bother. I used to come out with a tipster list each year, and I used to make it an annual thing. This is my first year. I didn't even put one out. Everything's coming out in IDP dime drops. It's just everybody's out there. There's so many of them. Do we really believe that all of these guys can all break out at once in 1 year? That's why I wanted to do this, to try to help some people that might be on some, teetering. Maybe this might be a good time. You've been doing one thing. Maybe just switch. What's it going to hurt? Realistically, we're probably not talking about top 5 stud here with anybody at this point. Excuse me. Anything can happen. But either way, I just want to make that clear about what this was mainly about.
Well, and sorry. Go ahead, JJ.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, okay, so follow up. So, we've heard positive news about Chase Young, but do you think it takes him time to get back up to speed? Which then
he'll still be on the he'll still be on the weak side. You're still going to have Sweet coming off the strong side. This is the tougher part to get after the pass rusher to begin with. You usually don't have a lot of production from that side to begin with. That's kind of tough. You got to be one of these bad dudes, to get that kind of high end production. That's usually how that goes. So, and I'm not saying he's not capable of it, but we're just talking about a little bit of film here. And, there's a lot going on, and they've just drafted another, because they let Ioannidis leave. They got another kind of high profile rookie defensive tackle to get into that rotation too.
Yeah, Mathis. Yeah, from Alabama.
Right. Yeah. So, depending on packages and stuff, who knows? I don't know. But I'm still not buying. I'm just not fading. I'll take him more as a depth piece.
Do we have any concerns about Chase Young? I mean,
I'm not drafting him. I haven't been drafting him. He's slipping down the boards. Concerns. That's kind of it's like a big bowl of Jello. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just right.
So explain, Gary. A big bowl of Jello.
Yeah, it might look all nice and shiny, but you just know when you take that bite, it's might not be quite what you was expecting. You know what I mean?
I have no idea what you mean.
All right, so here's my philosophy. If I've got a question whatsoever, he's got some injury, I'm avoiding him. I'm selling him until I see something more again. I'm not making any new investments in him. If I'm in a draft right now, I'm picking around him. It's as simple as that. I'm not, I just don't. And I'm a Ohio State guy, man. I've seen him play. That's part of the problem too. I've seen him take plays off.
You just get that feeling watching Chase Young. Like, I don't know.
Well, and he didn't look great last year. He looked okay, but you didn't see rookie year looked awesome and people were super excited.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was kind of, okay, what's next?
Right.
Deep defensive line, and nothing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's it. Everybody wanted to see a little bit more. I don't know. I just I did a pod today with Johnny the Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And we were discussing a little bit about just who's like the best young defensive end. And I was talking about Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett seems to have dog in him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he gets mad. He just has this, I called it the get off me dog, where it's just like, I don't know. Some of these players have that in them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just didn't see it from Chase last year. He just seemed like everything was cool. Everything's cool.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the issue you run into with these superstar kids that were great college athletes. They kind of coasted along with the talent because they were just better than everybody else.
They developed way before.
Right. So did he already break out in college and now we're just getting what we get? Who knows?
Right.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. I love what you said there about that plateau too. He should have took that next step his sophomore season, but it was almost barely plateaued,
Well, hopefully we see something this year and we're all on board the Chase Young train next year.
Yeah.
Gary, you're up. Who's your first fave?
My first fave is I'm going with Amani Hooker. And I know people have been waiting for this guy to break out for a couple of years. He kind of came out with a high profile and he's had some injury problems. He's on a defense. You got guys running around in front of him inside there. There's was it Cunningham and Kristen Kirksey? Is that who in front of him? Yeah. Flying around in front of him all the time. If I got the right defense.
Well, yeah. Cunningham came over there
Landry.
and then the kid that went to Atlanta.
Right. And I believe we got Bird deep, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Kevin Byard, yeah.
But did you know that little bit of time, and he was playing hurt, I believe, last year, the whole entire time, even when he come back, I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But did you know that the guy actually graded out as almost elite-ish with PFF?
Yeah, he really strong coverage grades.
With no IDP protection whatsoever. I think him coming into this year, I'm buying into him as a sleeper because he's beans. That's how I look at it. I've been high on Hooker for this coming into this year. I was looking forward to him. I knew his ADP actually is a little higher than I was expecting, but I do think that we're going to start seeing some more actual tackle production from this kid. And I'm willing to favor that just for the price.
Do we think that we need to see a decline in Byard before we see Hooker ascending, or do we think they both can have relevancy, Brad?
No, not with that linebacking group. You know, their linebackers are young. Like David Long is a young kid, and then Cunningham is kind of a retread, and Bud Dupree is kind of a retread. So I wouldn't necessarily say that. You know, Hooker, I mean, he showed up strong in the games that mattered. You know, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. I mean, these games against good competition, he played well. I mean, you know, digging into the PFF grades, that's where he graded out his best games, was against the toughest teams. So my anticipation would be is that we see him continuing to go up, because the linebackers are not great. Most of their linebackers are kind of pass rush specialist guys. They want to try to get after the quarterback. So some of that secondary is going to have to put in some extra work. Your corners might get left on islands a little bit more, you know, and look at what Vrabel does. I mean, he likes to make guys do a little extra work in the secondary there. So I'm with you. I think he's a solid buy. I mean, I would rather him over where you have to go to get Byard for sure. I mean, because it's a better price. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, everything you said. I mean, I'm not really high on Hooker, but I can definitely see this being a breakout year for him. I watched some tape on the Titans. It wasn't a wild card. It was second round playoff game against the Bengals. He had himself a game. He had an interception and a lot of tackles in that ball game. I was really impressed when I, looked into the tape and watched him play. I think it's going to be a big year for him, especially if he stays healthy.
Definitely add him to my list. Brandon, staying with you, is there something that you look for which immediately causes you to fade a player?
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at if they change teams and the outlook of the player as far as like snap counts. Is there like a pattern where this team has like a rotation? For the edge rushers, they rotate their edge rushers. Is the players going to decline? And if that means the player is going to have to be more efficient to retain his fantasy value. So I would say, you're looking at the team and the situation, the scheme that they're running, and if they rotate players in.
That makes sense. The same thing goes on offense, so I could see that definitely for IDP as well. Now, who is your first fade player, Brandon?
Fade. Let me see. I mentioned defensive end from Philadelphia, the new free agent signee.
Hassan Redicum.
Hassan Redicum. Yeah.
Hassan Redicum, my boy.
He had 11. Yeah, I mean, he's moving. Again, this is going to be his third team in 3 years. He had 11 sacks, double-digit sacks, I think, the previous 2 years. And now he's moving teams to the Eagles, and they run a heavy rotation with the defensive ends. So I'm predicting his sacks to decline because they got so many guys there. They got Reddick, they got Josh Sweat, they got Brandon Graham returning. There's another guy that is re-signed. There's like 4 or 5 guys there. They're going to rotate in, and they all play under 70% of snaps. And Reddick, I mean, he's been like around in that 80% range. So he's going to have to be ultra efficient to, get to those double-digit sacks and retain, the fantasy value that he had the past couple years. So that's why I got him as a fade.
That makes sense with the efficiency. Yeah, it's something being in Pennsylvania, I talk to a lot of Eagles fans, and that's what I've been bringing up because they've been very excited about Reddick. And I'm like, well, you guys aren't going to play him nearly enough because that's not what your coaching staff does. Brad, where are you at on Reddick this year?
Well, first and foremost, you have to decide where he's playing, right? So if you look early on, they're putting him at linebacker. I mean, if you stand him up and you put him in the middle, it's not going to go well for him. I mean, we saw him closer to the line of scrimmage, making bigger plays and doing better things as an edge rusher. I don't know that you're going to get the same type of value out of him if they're putting him as a linebacker. Now, obviously, their linebackers are weak, right? TJ Edwards is not great. They brought over Kazir White from the Chargers, who is an upgrade over what they had, and then drafted Nakobe Dean, who's a rookie that everybody was excited about until he slipped. So I'm not excited about what Philadelphia looks like they might do with them. Now, obviously, we're not at training camp yet. So the biggest thing for me is, where is he at in your league? So is he an edge guy? Because we know, Sleeper and some of these are doing the edge position, or is he pigeonholed as a linebacker? If he's pigeonholed as a linebacker, I'm not touching him most likely. If he's an edge guy, maybe consider him later. But it's just too scary for me, because I don't think he's going to have nearly as much opportunity. Because if he's, depending on what side they put him on, if they put him as your strong side linebacker, I mean, who's on the field in your dime and nickel packages, right? So, and if he's an edge rusher and he's on the line of scrimmage because you got older guys in Brandon Graham, okay, I would be fine thinking maybe there's some value there, but I don't see him getting the sack production. Double digits, I just don't expect this year.
Yeah, great insight. Like Brad said, Brad Menendez, Roto Heat Brad on Twitter, brought it up a great point when he said how he picks his favorite is he looks for opportunities, right? Brandon said when he looks at fades, it's guys who are changing schemes. Put them together. Guys who change schemes and lose opportunity, that's who you're fading. Brad, who do you have for your first fade?
So I'm going to go with a rookie, and this is definitely opportunity. This is Kyle Hamilton from the Baltimore Ravens. Going into the draft, I was super excited about him. Actually, I really wanted Detroit to get him with their second first-round pick. Trade up and get him, and then get Aiden and Kyle and make the defense great again. Baltimore did it and drove me nuts because they have safeties already. They've got quality safeties, and I have no understanding what they're doing. Typically, you don't see Baltimore deploying 3 and 4 safeties like you saw a couple years back. Teams trying to face Lamar Jackson, they put 3 safeties on the field. You don't see Baltimore do that nearly as much. So I don't know what's going to happen with Kyle Hamilton for at least year 1 and potentially year 2. I mean, there was concerns about the athletic profile, but when you look at the on-the-field play, it doesn't matter. This kid can ball when he's on the field. Well, how's he going to get on the field if he's, safety 3, potentially safety 4, needing an injury to get him in the game? Or like Brandon mentioned with the rotational stuff. Rotational stuff scares me. And in the safety room, I just don't see that happening for Baltimore. So I'm going to fade Kyle Hamilton because where I see people taking him is just not where I'm going to jump on that kind of player. I would let someone else. And what I do next year is he's my top target. I go try to trade when he's cheaper because people are now mad because he didn't get in the game, right?
Absolutely. Buy the dip. Gary, where are you on Kyle Hamilton?
Again, and I'm not cracking on rookies altogether, folks, but we only had 2 rookies in balanced formats to even show up in the top 64 last year. And usually the average out of all of them is drafted each year, I think, is just under 4%. I actually got tired of tracking that in a thing that I've been doing since like 2013. It's just worthless. It's not changed. It stayed there. So for that fact, it's a watered down position. We can get better at what he's saying. If you're thinking you're going to pay that high price and you're going to get something this year, probably not happening. The odds aren't really good for it.
And you need a safety. Like if you look at snap percentages, you need your safeties to be playing 90+%. Right. That's the only way you're starting a safety. You don't want to start a situational safety.
Yep.
Doesn't turn out well.
Well, and who does he play over? They paid a bunch of money for Marcus Williams. They have Chuck Clark, and they drafted another safety in the 4th round too, right? Yeah.
And I loved how everybody automatically goes, well, there goes Chuck Clark. Who says? He's a favorite he's a favorite of Harbaugh's. He always has been. That's how he got this gig to begin with as a nobody because he earned it.
He's the quarterback of the defense.
So you just aren't going to jerk that out of the middle of your defense, especially when you got Patrick Quinn in the middle that can't keep the play calls right. You got to have somebody on the field doing the damn job, and Chuck Clark is it. You ain't handling that yet. Hamilton might be a badass, but he's not going to come in there and run that defense the way the Harbaugh wants it done.
All right, Garrett. So who are you fading?
Now I mentioned in a post when I was talking about this podcast tonight that we were going to have some people that might get a little bit ruffled about a couple of these.
I mean, you do see the hat the guest is wearing.
Yeah. Maybe the whole Hamilton thing. Oh no, I didn't. And I'm not looking right at it. And in the whole situation, I think that some people might be a little bit upset about this Derrick Barnes. Man, come on. I mean, I like a good Cinderella story, and I get it. The guy was an outside pass rusher in college. He moved to inside linebacker off the ball. They kind of reached for him. They've traded all the way up to get him in the 4th round. He graded poorly last year.
Mhm.
He couldn't outplay Angelo. He couldn't outplay Reeves Maybean for time. I'm just not buying. The guy might be a superstar athlete or whatever and have all this upside, but he is not going to all of a sudden have a light bulb click in year 2 if he is not ready in the way that he looked on film last year. I don't think he can run the defense correctly. If he does, he probably will suck at his job. So I just don't see going and spending what people are looking for him. There are so many options out there. I'd rather have a Morrow, or I'd rather have I don't know. We could go through a few, but there's other guys I'd definitely rather have than Derrick Barnes, and in his little bit of what we got to see last year, because he couldn't unseed anybody, wasn't all that.
Brad, do you want the opportunity to defend your Lion?
Well, I think you're right. This year, you're going to have tough times with him because he's still developing.
Mm-hmm.
Purdue's 3-4 scheme is much different than an NFL 3-4 scheme, because really all he did was pass rush. So getting up to the NFL level, he's going to need time. Like, it would not surprise me if Chris Board, the kid they brought over from Baltimore, starts with Alex Anzalone, and then Barnes is rotating in and getting.
And they got a couple other guys they brought in too, right? And when you look at what they're comparing, you're looking at some veterans that have learned the hard way, that are maybe a little bit more adjusted on the field, and they're hungry. I'm sure they weren't told, yeah, come on over here, man, you're going to be backups.
Well,
these guys are going to be competing. I think it's going to be tough for Barnes. Go right ahead.
No,
I apologize. And I did not
fine.
know you were a Lions fan, man. If I had, I forgot. I apologize.
I like anytime we can talk about Lions. If Craig would have been on here, he would have laughed, because I find a way on our IDP show to talk Lions as much as possible, and it drives him crazy.
I think we had that discussion last time he was on. My bad, man.
They've got Julian Okwara, who's a kid that they've been trying to develop as well, the kid from Notre Dame. So they have some young guys that they want to develop, but this is a team that, they're not ready for playoff contention, but they want to compete in their division. So you're not competing with rookies and second-year guys that are still trying to pick things up. I mean, Chris Board came over with an opportunity to start. Will Harris is a safety that they have that they've really been playing a lot more as a linebacker because he sucks in the secondary. So, there's some things that they're trying to do to help some of these young guys. Could Barnes take the next step? Yes. I don't think it's this year, though.
The last I had read, I thought Will Harris was playing cornerback.
Well, yeah, they have him in the slot. They've had him as a kind of a linebacker.
Oh, I thought he was moved there this year.
Yeah, they've called they have some weird term for him, but he's not a safety anymore. I mean, it's a slot corner that
what's
plays
it called?
Linebacker.
You're the bubble guy.
Yeah, right. Basically, make sure tight ends don't destroy us again.
Right.
Brandon,
I'm sorry, man.
Brandon, who's your second fade?
My second fade is going to be Denzel Pearman, linebacker for the Las Vegas Raiders. And the reason I have him as a fade, I mean, he's almost 30 years old, and he finally broke out. Had like 150 tackles. It's like a top 10 ranking. But he hasn't been. He's not good in coverage, and that's been a knock on him throughout his career. He's been like a 2-down linebacker. So he's a good run stopper, but he's not particularly good in coverage. And now with them changing the coaching staff, I believe they have a new defensive coordinator. He runs a new scheme, the 3-4 scheme, and also he's been known to run a lot of dime packages. And I don't anticipate Denzel Pearman being a 3-down linebacker in this scheme. I don't anticipate him being a dime linebacker. He's not good in coverage. They have other guys there that are better in coverage, like second-year linebacker, the who's converted safety. So that'd be a prototypical role for him to be, coverage linebacker. And also they have Jayon Brown, who played dime linebacker last season with the Tennessee Titans. So that's why I have Denzel Pearman as a fade. He played 83% of the defensive snaps last season. I'm anticipating that to go down into the 60% range. And I don't think he's going to hit this year like he did last season.
So, Brad, is Pearman a 2-down banger?
Man, this probably, but this defense as a whole is terrifying with what they're trying to do, asking Max Crosby and Cleveland Farrell and Chandler Jones to just kind of all be stand-up pass rush guys when their defensive line is brutal. I mean, you're looking at like what Vernon Butler and Jonathan Hankins, who hasn't been good in 3 years, 4 years. I mean, it's these safety. I'm taking all the safeties I can get from the Raiders and I'm stashing them to see what happens because those guys might be getting a ton of tackles this year because the rest of these guys struggle. I mean, Jayon Brown, I liked him a lot in Tennessee. I don't know if 2 under 6 foot linebackers in the middle of this defense does anything. I mean, teams are going to be moving the ball very well against this defense. They're going to have to put up a lot of points on offense to keep up.
Well, that's good if you have Carr and Adams. Not so good, though, if you have the defense. Gary, is there anybody you're targeting in this linebacking core besides if you're not into Pearman?
Well, yeah, I faded Pearman. I used to be a Chargers fan. Sorry. So I faded him back then. But either way, and I haven't missed him really. You know, I know he's had a couple of other good years, so but I didn't need it. Debo. You know, we kind of got to look at Debo a little bit, some dynasty deep leagues possibly, or
Diablo.
Diablo.
Yeah,
excuse me, Diablo. It's I always picture what's the guy getting his ass sued, divorce, and he's out in the desert and he's got the wolves around him and he's spraying shit. Johnny Depp. That's who I picture when we say that because it's like Diablo. Or some shit. So, anyways, but I mean, I would
Jello and Johnny Depp. Is that where we're going?
I would pay to listen to a podcast where Gary describes things, and we have to figure out what he's describing.
Right.
Pictionary.
I mean, Johnny Depp. You could describe him in a million ways, but you say the guy who was in the desert spraying perfume on wolves.
Yeah, right. I guess I wanted to get a visual out there, man. Wasn't it fun? You know, you've seen
all right. So Diablo, I like Diablo. I just traded for him in a league.
Yeah.
So
if it's
tell
a
me good
dynasty, if that's, I mean, he showed out last year on the field. You know, I mean, and that, like as it's been pointed out, the linebacker room is not all that exciting over there. So, you know, I'm not expecting him to be one of my starters on one of my squads, but I sure like to get him on a dynasty stash and have him there just in case, because Pearman's, man, when does that shelf life run out? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, what about these
guys just get lucky, you know?
Well, what about these kids they brought up from Denver? Kenny Young, Micah Kaiser, you know, do they have a chance, Gary? What do you think about those two?
I mean, replace a Pearman with a Pearman? I don't know. What's the options? Right.
It's like that Spider-Man meme where they're two Spider-Mans are pointing at each other.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yep.
All right, Brandon. You are out on Denzel. Brad, who is your second fade?
So it's Jamin Davis from the Washington Commanders.
Uh-oh.
The struggle I have with this kid, and as much as I like him, it seems like it's Cole Holcomb, and then I'm not really jumping on anybody right now, right? You know, they have those two guys typically on the field the most. And I think Jamin Davis is going to be good for the long term, you know, if you want to try to target him in a dynasty situation. I just struggle with this year with what to do with him because there were times last year where, man, he just looked out of place. It looked like he was maybe a little lost, you know, and sometimes you see a big jump from year one to year two, but because he came from such a raw system, I think it's going to take a little bit more time for him to really get up to speed and become a guy you can trust as an LB that you're starting. If you want him as depth, fine, but I'm not touching him this year. I'm not interested. I'll let someone else jump on that one.
He was horrible on film, horrible in production when he got the opportunity, and he's a horrible option as a sleeper right now.
He's an athletic linebacker, but that doesn't always
he's-
transition to the NFL.
You got to learn the game. There's a learning curve. People got to remember that, and you got to look where these guys come from, especially the deeper draft picks.
And especially
he wasn't,
depending on
he wasn't, but
the position,
deeper
right?
ones.
Like, where are these guys?
Yeah.
Like,
And Holcomb's clearly the guy, so.
All
What
right,
do you
Brandon.
think, Brandon?
So Gary is kind of on the fence about him. I wasn't sure. I'm trying to read.
I wasn't getting a good
leaves.
feeling from him.
Me neither,
Yeah.
Brad. So Brandon, can you provide the hammer here? What do you think about Davis?
Well, to be honest with you, I agree with Gary. I watched a lot of Jamin Davis tape. He wasn't instinctive. He was out of place. And also, I listened to some of the coaches during the off season. They said Coach Ron Rivera was adamant that they needed a Mike linebacker, and I was curious about that because they drafted Jamin Davis to be their Mike linebacker, their main linebacker, and he couldn't do it. They said he was having communication issues, and Cole Holcomb was trying to coach him through it. Was telling him, hey, just trust your process and make the call. He struggled with that the whole season, and the snap counts reflected it. He never was a full-time linebacker. So he has a lot of developing to do, and I'm thinking, he's going to have to develop this year. I'm going to have to see it before, I invest in him. That's just my take.
So we're not necessarily getting rid of him in dynasty leagues. We just have to show a little more patience.
Man, if you got him in a dynasty league, you probably paid out the wazoo IDP wise his rookie season to get him. So you just sit. You don't have a choice, right?
Listen, I'm just making sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I
and
mean,
it
unless
was-
somebody's going to, offer something, but right now everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, sure. Right. I'll give you beans.
Well, and it wouldn't surprise me if you, wait till the trade deadline. If you really want to get rid of him, wait, see what happens the first part of the year. And as soon as he pops, if you're really off the bandwagon, sell him then, package him up, get a better linebacker, whatever you want to do. But it wouldn't surprise me. They got a kid behind him, Kaliki Hudson, who came from the University of Michigan, pro style defense. He went later. So 5th round draft pick in a couple years back or last year. He didn't get on the field much, but, pro style guy. Had the defense, the 4-3 that, very similar to what Washington would run. So it wouldn't surprise me if a guy like that pushes Davis. If Davis really isn't getting it, they got to get somebody in there, right? And this kid, was able to call some plays. So
I love Curl. I love Curl.
From the safety.
No Collins. Davis struggling. Who else they even have at linebacker? What they got at inside linebacker?
David Mayo, Kaliki
right.
Hudson, and then a bunch of college free agents.
And speaking of that, besides Davis, again, we know PFF and all the end all or whatever, but Davis was poorly graded, and at the same time, right now in OTAs, he's actually rotating with David Mayo. Yeah. So they can't even feel confident enough to go ahead and just give it to him. Get out there, boy! You're screwing it up. Have a seat.
All right, Gary, I'm going to give you a chance to go first with your final favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Which player are you pushing as a fave for this year?
I'm going to circle back around and remind people about Trevis Gipson, the edge rusher for the Chicago Bears. A little extra bonus, Robert Quinn is holding out. So between him and I am not going to be able to pronounce the other gentleman's name that they just signed from a longtime Indianapolis Colt, which is kind of on his last legs. They're really excited for this Gibson kid up there. He actually just switched to becoming an edge rusher last year, and he really had some good, outstanding games. He showed good technique for a guy that hadn't been doing it prior to that. That they got the job done. He didn't break out the entire season. I think there was some hampering there, but at the same time, you had Robert Quinn on the weak side getting all the glory and just having a hellacious season. So I like him a lot. I don't think that I like this call because I feel like that he did enough to show us that he's capable of doing it. And right now, that opportunity for him to take that next step, considering what he got done in his first season as a new edge rusher. I like his opportunity, and I think you can get him pretty cheap in a lot, unless you're listening to this. I think you can get him kind of cheap, considering at the DL or the edge spot, depending what your designated position is.
I mean, he definitely didn't come into the league with a lot of hoopla around him.
No, I think he's
right?
fourth rounder or fifth rounder, something like that. Right. He's just one of those guys that came in. We mentioned guys like Chuck Clark. We mentioned some of these veterans board, some of these guys that earned their way, and it's just, I think that he just impressed. He really impressed.
B-Jack, where are you on Trevis?
I like him. I mean, he's a young and ascending player. And I think with another year of development, that I think he could be a big time sleeper this season. I'm looking at the new coaching staff. They don't seem like rotate the defensive end. They don't have a heavy rotation of defensive ends. His snap counts were kind of sporadic. I noticed they were pulling them off on some early downs. So I'm thinking that, he can improve on his run defense because they were pulling them off on early downs. But on passing downs, he was on the field. And I'm thinking if he can improve on that, then he can get his snap rate up to 70-80%. And, I give him a good chance of breaking out because his coaching staff, they don't have a track history of a heavy rotation. So, I mean, I like him. He really impressed last season. And I'm with Gary on. I actually invested in him in one of my dynasty leagues.
Well, and you have to trust a defensive-minded coach, right? Matt Eberflus, he had some really strong Indianapolis defenses over the last few years. So if he likes this kid and he's putting his stamp on him, even though he wasn't necessarily one of his guys originally, that's a big selling point. They brought over Al-Qadim Muhammad from Indy with, and other than that, I mean, you have Robert Quinn who's getting up there in age. So my only concern with this situation is the division they're in has some pretty solid offensive line. So, 4 to 6 games a year, he's facing some top end, tackles, whether it's my Detroit Lions or the Packers. Minnesota's getting better on the offensive line side of things. But then the other side of it is they don't have a ton of defensive line talent. They got some aging guys, and then they have a couple of these type of semi-productive, I don't want to call them sleepers, but guys that haven't really breaking out, but have some potential. So you have to, you have to be concerned, but if you want to target somebody for cheap, this is a nice guy to target because nobody's jumping on this guy unless you're in super deep leagues and you've been watching Gary and you listen to him, then you're targeting him.
Hey, and technically I only need him to get another 0.25% of production, and I wasn't wrong.
Just need the validation, eh?
Just a half a tier. Give me that half a tier. That's all I need.
Well, he's certainly got the potential. I mean, the defense is definitely in transition, but a lot of the players from the previous regime can kind of convert to a 4-3 better than what they were. I mean, they didn't look great as a 3-4, but a lot of these guys can be fine as a 4-3. So there's potential there. Definitely intrigued. I'm not targeting him in most of my leagues, but it's not because I haven't tried. It's just because I don't need to at this point.
Right. But, and his ADP is down there. So you don't have to target him. You just kind of wait on him.
Yep.
Right.
Brandon, who is your second favorite player?
I'm going to go out on a limb. I know Gary is not going to like this one because it's a rookie, but I'm going with Malcolm Rodriguez, linebacker, Detroit Lions. I like him. You just looking at his college profile, he was very productive. He racked up a bunch of tackles senior season. He had well over 100 tackles, and he landed in Detroit. I think it's a wide open depth chart. They have a lot of mediocre players there. I was looking at some of the PFF grades. Alex Anzalone, their top linebacker last season, he graded out very poorly, like in the 30s PFF grade. Had a lot of missed tackles. I think the Detroit Lions, as their linebacking crew, they had the most missed tackles. And I'm looking at that and what they've done in free. They haven't done much in free agency either. They signed Chris Board, who Brad was talking about earlier. He's been a backup with New Orleans Saints his whole career, mostly a special teams guy. So I think it's a wide open depth chart. I think he has a great chance of possibly winning the starting job. I'm gonna say he has a good chance of winning the starting job in training camp. They've been raving him about him in OTAs.
Stick up.
A lot of
Put it in there, man. Stick that flag in there. Make that dip. Come on.
Bringing
Stick
that heat,
flag in
baby.
there and say it. Say it like you mean it.
Yeah, but I've been excited from what I'm hearing from the beat reporters. Are saying he's been impressive. He was impressive in college. Like his only knock, he's undersized. He's 5'11", like 220 something pounds. So he slipped to the 6th round. But he's been productive in college and he's impressed in OTAs. I think he has a decent shot of taking the starting job, and I think he can be their best linebacker.
Well, I'm going to make it simple, Brad, because this guy was the only guy that we didn't talk about when we was talking about Barnes. I like the kid. I actually seeing him there. I mean, it only had to take me back to thinking about the whole situation. Now, I like Board, but at the same time, when I looked at what this kid has here going on in OTAs, I really think that's the guy that Barnes ought to be worried about. If not this year, next year, if Barnes don't take that next step. What do you think?
Well, so what we saw in college was, and he has a really great story. He came to Oklahoma as an offensive player. They converted him because of injuries to the defense as a safety and then moved him into the linebacker. I mean, this kid will do whatever you need him to do. He takes care of himself, so he doesn't miss a lot of time. I mean, his best ability is not only availability, but his hunger, his desire, his drive, so I'm rooting for the kid. I would love to see, especially because our defensive line is getting better. They've got young talent, not only with Aiden, but guys from last year with Rodriquez and Ali McNeil. So the defensive line is getting better. So some of these linebackers will have some help just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got an uphill battle to become a starter week 1 just because Anzalone's been in the system and Chris Board is a guy that they tried to, he had a chance in Baltimore to be a starter, didn't get it, right? They drafted guys and he never got to it. So he has a chance here. I just don't know if he's got the athletic ability to really hold down a starting position. Rodriquez does, though. This kid is a hammer when, and he has no problem running downhill. He plays a lot in the box. He even played some slot corner. I mean, when you look at his rep breakdown, I think he played like 50, 60 snaps covering guys outside. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's on the field early. I love the hot take that he's a starter. I think Brandon, that's amazing. I love it. I don't know that I can buy it just because of what they've promised to some of these other guys, but hey, talent always wins out. And Dan Campbell is a guy that it doesn't matter what he's given you. If you've earned it, he will give it to you. So these young guys can earn it. So I like him. Undersized, though, that scares me for health in the NFL because Oklahoma State talent is not the same as NFL talent. So what they've been facing is not the same. So we'll see. It'll be fun to watch, though.
Yeah.
All right, Brad, sticking with you then. Who is your final favorite?
Oh, who else? Oh, yeah. We're talking about another Michigan man, Kwitty Paye from the Indianapolis Colts, defensive end. He showed a little bit better last year, and this defensive line excites me because he is probably one of their most talented, but they've also added some pieces to try to help him out, added some other pieces so that he doesn't have to face a ton of double teams. He grades out, if you want to look at grades, he wasn't the greatest graded player, still was fighting through injuries and still trying to develop and grow in that scheme. He played a ton of snaps. I think he had 350, 400 snaps last year. So definitely got the reps. I'm excited about what he can be, though. This team, they added pieces. They're better in all phases. And the only concern I have is with Matt Ryan. If he's there and they're, controlling the clock and the offense is doing a good job not being Carson Wentz and giving the ball back, Kwitty Paye doesn't have as many snaps. That concerns me. But I'm excited about him. Buckner is a great guy to take the double teams and let Kwitty Paye rush off the edge. They've got a combination of Ngakoue and Bangu and some of these other guys on the other side, but they're not as talented as Paye. They spent a lot on Paye. Was a second round pick, I think, when they drafted him. He has the upside, and I'm excited to see where he goes. I just need to see him get better at tackling, and I need to see him getting better at fighting through some of those initial. It seemed like there were times where he was, guys were getting up in his body and he was having trouble getting off some of those bigger physical tackles. So there's some ups and downs with him, but I'm excited about him that I'm willing to try to buy and see what happens.
So, Brandon, do you think investing in Kwitty will pay off for you?
I like Kwitty Paye a lot, and I wrote him up on my Key and Diagnose series a few months ago, and he was very impressive. He came into the league as like a developmental project out of Michigan, so he needed some development. First part of the year, he struggled. He had a hamstring injury that kind of set him back, but you look at the second half of the season, he had all four of his sacks came in the second half of the season. And like Brad was saying, what he did in the off season to help him out, adding that talent with Ndakwe. And, they got some other guys there, Deo Odiingbo, the second round pick last year, who they're very high on, Taekwon Lewis there. He'll be rotating in, and DeForest Buckner. So, there's talent around him that's going to limit the double teams. And, I'm looking for a breakout season out of Kwitty Paye. They're very high on him.
Well, that sounds awesome to me, gentlemen. So we've each done our two favorites. We've each given at least one fade, most of us two. Were there any honorable mentions, right? As you guys are going through your list, you're figuring out who you want to talk about. Who was close? Who was close for you, Brad, that you thought you might want to talk about, but you're like, eh.
Well, the funniest thing is when we were having the conversations, over the weekend and earlier today and getting ready for the show, Hassan Redicum was the first guy that I put on my list. And then I was thinking first and second year guys, so I took him off. So I love that you guys put him. Another guy that I would want to talk about at least a little bit was one that our friend Craig put on that we aren't going to get to talk about, but I will bring up a little bit. Marcus Davenport from the Saints. Man, I just don't like. I didn't like him coming out. I don't like the situation. I don't think he's a strong play just because it doesn't seem like he's getting it. When you watched him last year, when you watched his development, he just doesn't seem to know how to really consistently get behind the line of scrimmage and get after people. I'm really concerned with, especially I've seen in a few of my leagues, people targeting him as sleepers. And I'm like, I'm still in bed.
Right.
Like there's no chance I'm waking up from that one. So that's one guy that I definitely thought we should honorably mention tonight.
I'm glad you did bring that one up. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not on that bandwagon either.
I know, because you traded him to me.
So, JJ, why are you on the bandwagon? What do you like about him?
I think I
why we're
overpaid.
wrong.
I think I had to really, really overpay to get.
Yeah, I made Gary overpay for somebody, and that was part of the deal. So yeah, I mean, I'm not completely down on Davenport, but like I said, I'm an IDP enthusiast. I'm not an analyst like you gentlemen.
Well, that's what IDP.
There's not a lot of talent down there, though.
Right.
So I'm just hoping he gets the opportunity. But something has to change in New Orleans, man. I don't know. They're kind of stagnating right now.
Well, and Peyton Turner is the concern for me. Like Peyton Turner, I think, is going to get a chance to rotate in with him. So what does that do to the snap counts, right?
Right.
I hope so. Peyton Turner, is he going to be ready to go? I know there was some question about surgery he had, and
let me check. Last I heard, I thought he was making good recovery, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's cleared. They said he was cleared.
Yeah, he's cleared to return. Yep. 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's what I like to hear. Brandon, did you have any honorable mentions you wanted to talk about? Anybody who was close?
Yes. Yes. Odafe Owe from the Baltimore Ravens, second-year edge rusher. Me and Gary are, pretty high up on him. We talk about how quick twitch he has on the outside. He impressed early in his rookie season. He made Defensive Player of the Year in week 2 for his strip against Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I believe it was like a Monday night game. He was very productive the early part of the season, and he kind of slowed down the second half. But I've seen enough on tape, and the team is very excited about his future. I think he has the talent to be one of the best edge rushers in the league. And you just look at him; they're going to really depend on him this season, especially the early portion of the season, with their top, because their sack leader from last season, Tyus Bowser, he got an Achilles injury the last game of the season, so he's probably going to be on the pup, probably going to miss probably 6 games or maybe half the season before he comes back. So they're going to depend on Odafe Owe. The Ravens, they've always been a very strong defensive unit. So I think they're going to develop him this year, especially with this year. It's a very important year. No COVID restrictions. So they're going to do everything to develop this guy and make sure that he develops into one of the best pass rushers in the league. I'm looking forward to a breakout season for Odafe Oweh.
With your endorsement, I just want to say to MFL, if you're listening, you still have his name wrong in your site. You have him listed as Jason. It's not the man's name. Yeah. He changed it a year ago. Get it together. I don't know who I need to contact. If anybody knows anybody at MFL, but call the man by his name. Fix it.
Sleeper doesn't screw these things up. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Perfect.
MFL can't even give us the opportunity of the edge position. I mean, it's all MFL needs to up its game. It's been the standard for a while, but it's slipping.
Yeah, it needs to go up.
Yeah, that's one of my main reasons too. That was one of my main reasons why I kicked back, because the designation, the linebacker designation. If you're in one of those leagues with edge designation, then yeah, he's a perfect pick. But as far as linebacker, no.
Well, and my only really concern is the defense around him. Right, he's got the Golden Girls in the front of him. He's got all his defensive line 70 years old and older. The middle linebacker Josh Bynes has been a retread journeyman. You've got the secondary is a bright spot. They got Mark Peters. They got some great guys. Linebackers. I mean, we already know Gary loves Patrick Queen, so
he's out there running around confused.
And so it's like, okay, what are teams going to focus on? They're going to take out that pass rusher. They're going to double guys. They're going to make sure that always getting extra attention. I don't know. So that's my concern. I mean, I love Calais Campbell. I got plenty of his rookie cards and autographs. He's an amazing talent. He's also old, right? He's not going to be able to give it everything.
Oh yeah, he wore us out for years as a great play, right? God, that dude, and he's still out there playing with the big boys, but he looks like a beast. He's just huge.
So that's my concern. I love the player though. I mean, definitely a great player. This defense though, I feel like they need to infuse some youth. I know they grabbed Jones in the third round as a nose tackle, but other than that, I mean, a lot of
they got
older guys
another second year. I think they got another second year, or didn't they just draft another edge rusher that is like a prototype?
David Ojabo.
Yeah,
he's going to be out
though.
this year.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
They got the Justin Matabuke, who they got in 2020 in the third round, who they like.
They signed Justin Houston.
Yeah, they got Justin Houston as well. I mean,
love the guy, but geez,
another old one.
Another old one. Didn't even know he was still playing. Gary, you're the last man standing. Do you have any honorable mentions? Nah, you're good?
Nah, we're good.
All right, gentlemen. Well, it's now time for final thoughts. You're going to let everybody know where they can find you and anything that you are working on. Brad.
Always working on something, whether I'm editing Craig's Player Normal Activity, which I'm currently doing in between this wonderful opportunity to hang out with y'all. Rotoheat.com is kind of our main hub. You can get to our Discord channel. You can get to our Facebook group. I mean, we've got something like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 total people between all of our groups, and we're growing. So I love and appreciate everybody that takes time to hang out with us. Our YouTube channel, like you guys, is growing. We're working on stuff. I've been working on doing some shorts and learning more on the YouTube side of things. We're trying to produce some better content and do things like that. But, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys. I love coming on other shows and hanging out, and especially talking to the GOAT and hanging out, meeting some new friends. I appreciate talking to JJ and Brandon. I'm absolutely going to have to go follow you on Twitter now, because I'm excited to see some of your stuff too. You guys are great, and I love hanging out, and I just appreciate your time.
Great.
So man, happy to have you.
Yep.
B-Jack.
Yes, you can find me at BJack83 on Twitter. Right now, we're working on the site rankings. It's redraft season, so we're gonna be working on pushing out those rankings. And also, I'm conducting a series right now. It's called Keep, Trade, or Cut. I complete edition. I'm also going to be on defensive line and safeties. So it's pretty much to educate people as far as like from a dynasty perspective. These players are, what we need to consider, trade or cut here. So check out the series. It's got a lot of insightful things on it.
Sounds great, Garrett.
Just go to gridironratings.com and head to the tipsters page. Check out my working example for the start sit charts and my waiver wires and all that. Hey, man, subscribe. Love you, folks. Thanks for participating and viewing. And thanks, Brad, for coming, man. We're going to get you back on here again, man. I got you hooked.
Love it. My pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to everybody for tuning in. A special thank you to Brad and Brandon for joining us tonight. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and checking out all their content. Thank you to Gary for putting the show together. You can find me on Twitter at JJ Wenner. Be sure you're tuning into all of the Gridiron Ratings podcasts. Pull up a chair tomorrow for the Rider Dynasty pod with me and our special guest, Andrew Erickson from Fantasy Pros. Catch the Fantasy Chop Shop with Ronnie and Jeff on Saturdays. And Getting Defensive will be back next Tuesday with Jorge Edwards and Nate Markham of Fantasy in Frames. And remember, your path to the title starts with Gridiron Ratings. Boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.